Welcome into the Hard Count and happy National Signing Day. Wishing someone happy National Signing Day during the February signing period kind of has like a wishing Merry Christmas to someone during the month of January. We're still all celebrating. We're absolutely celebrating this class, but a lot of us have sort of opened most of the presents. Some presents maybe still being opened. Glad to have you all here. It is Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. Last one on the face of the planet. A lot of ball to be talked, but National Signing Day has got to lead this thing off. So let's start there. In the day and age of the transfer portal, with so many players changing teams, so many big-time players changing teams, and it feels like mobility has never been higher in the world of college football, and that's 100% the case. The question has started to arise from some of the more jaded fans in college football. Hey, does National Signing Day still matter? JD, I appreciate the rankings. I appreciate seeing who's a 5-star, who's a 4-star, but at the end of the day here, there's a good chance that my prized prospect from our top 10 class may not be there next year. And so honestly, do I really want to get my hopes up? Do I want to invest myself emotionally into National Signing Day, knowing full well now that that class may not fall apart, but look very different in terms of who's still on campus a year later, 2 years later, when all the dust settles on this thing. And I totally understand where you're coming from. Let me be the first to say that. I am validating what you are saying. I understand the hesitation to become attached to a class when everyone can leave at the drop of a hat. Pete Nakos has a phenomenal article out right now on on3.com talking about how it's so difficult to retain top quarterbacks today in college football. Obviously, only one of those guys gets to be on the field at a time, but he put out a stat from the 2021 to 2023 recruiting classes. So that's 3 classes there. Of all of those top 10 quarterbacks from each class, so 30 quarterbacks total, 18, more than half of those quarterbacks hit the portal. That's just the quarterback position. Not even talking about the rest of your roster and what that could look like. So what you're saying is totally fair. But my answer to that, when you say, does National Signing Day still matter? I would say absolutely. Absolutely, it still matters. And let me put it to you this way. If we're going to be super pessimistic and say 25% of your signing class will hit the portal at some point in time, 25%, I mean, 1/4, that's a pretty good amount, right? That's probably the worst case scenario. Well, doesn't that make it even more important for the 75% of your class that remains to be rock solid? Doesn't it make it more important for you to stack solid classes together? Look at what happened in the college football playoff this past year. Remember, modern college football now, everyone's changing teams. The team that won the national title, first off, didn't have a top 10 portal class. They made some big acquisitions via the portal, but it was all about adding a Will Howard into an already really solid roster, adding a Caleb Downs into a really elite defense. Now, they recruited at a high level. That's why they had the roster they had to add in a Will Howard, to have a Caleb Downs make the difference that he made. Look at it from a big picture perspective. Stats by Cato here. Of this past college football playoff field, the 12 teams, 4 of those teams recruited in the top 10 in the 2021 cycle. 7 of those teams in total recruited in the top 20. 2022, you had 8 teams recruited in the top 20, 5 of those teams in the top 10. Their 2023 cycle, 5 in the top 10, 8 in the top 20. So translation, the teams that made the college football playoff, those rosters, did they have some key portal pieces? Did some of those teams have good portal classes? Absolutely. But for the most part, the core pieces of those rosters, the recipes, the makings of those rosters were added via the recruiting apparatus of the high school level. So you got to have the portal. It definitely has to be a part of your roster composition these days. But to say that National Signing Day just doesn't matter anymore, that to me is very, very far from the truth. To put it this way, if you're going to say National Signing Day doesn't matter, I would ask you the question then, okay, what does matter? I'm assuming your answer is the transfer portal. That's all that matters. The transfer portal is great, but we've seen teams go very heavy in the portal and have it kind of come back to bite them. Look at Florida State, a great example. They survived through the portal in a lot of ways. They made their living through the portal during that season where they won the ACC. But then this past season, what happens? Kind of falls apart. A couple of missed evaluations. A couple of pieces don't really fit how you thought they would. Who's to say what the chemistry looked like internally? I don't know. I'm just assuming. Didn't yield great results. If you live by the portal, you also die by the portal. It's a very risky game to run. To me, it's a lot like groceries versus eating out. You can eat out for every meal, but at some point in time, it's going to start costing you. It's not the most sustainable model in the world. You'd much rather be able to say, okay, we're going to eat out on special occasions, anniversary's tomorrow, by the way, anniversary meal or a birthday or whatever special occasions, great, let's go eat out. But for the most part, it's more sustainable to say we're going to go to the grocery store, get the right nutrition for us, put it in the fridge, put it in the pantry, and when it's the proper time now, we'll draw upon those different things that we got at the high school level at the grocery store and develop that and cook that up the right way, and then we'll have success. So ultimately, I'm here telling you, National Signing Day, even with player mobility being at an all-time high, even with the likelihood that your class will guys leave from whoever signs, yeah, absolutely. That's the day and age we're living in now. But National Signing Day is still, I believe, the bread and butter of what college football is. You make your meal through the high school level. You win national titles through the high school level. That's how you make your meal. Now, you can add some sauce to it via the portal. That obviously is going to improve things. It's going to help things. But if all you have is sauce, guess what you have? You have soup. And the soup, that'd be pretty disgusting if it's only sauce. That's my humble opinion. Now, has the portal become more important? Again, absolutely it has. 110%. Of the college football playoff field from this past cycle, half the field had a transfer quarterback. 3 of those teams had a top 10 portal class going into the season, and you sprinkle on top of that Notre Dame was in the top 15 in their portal class in terms of what they did this past season and how it impacted it. So it's all about, again, having a roster of solid talent to add portal pieces to. If you want to eat out every meal, be my guest, but it's not going to be the most sustainable way to go about your business for years to come. So National Signing Day still matters, still important, still a celebration. We enjoy it. We appreciate it. We're here for it. And I'm very, very excited to see what the next class looks like here as we turn the page on 2025 and move on to the 2026 class. Time is just flying by, man. Absolutely flying by. So we're going to talk a little bit about some spring quarterback battles a little bit later. But we touched on this on our last show, and I just wanted to revisit this with a more formulated thought for you. Matt Rule made some waves when he said at his press conference, hey, our spring game is probably going to look a little bit different from a broadcast point of view. He's like, I did my spring game a year ago, and everybody sees it on TV, and then, the following days, we got a bunch of people hitting up our players, tampering, which he said doesn't exist anymore, which I 100% agree, tampering with our roster because they saw them play in the spring game. Essentially, it's great for us to have the celebration of spring, but ultimately we're opening ourselves up to have more problems than maybe what the spring game broadcast would provide for us from a solutions and answers point of view about our roster. And I totally get it. Like, as a college football sicko, y'all that watch the show, we love, enjoy, and celebrate spring games. Spring games for us are kind of like a glass of water in the desert. That is the offseason. It's refreshing to see 11-on-11 football on our TV screens again and get excited about your 5-star prospect that enrolled early, excited to see the guys that have made some buzz behind closed doors get a chance to really strut their stuff. Like, we love spring games, dude. We talk about it. We react to it, all that. But on a football level, which, again, that's what we are here. We're a football show. I see why this is a problem for people in the football world. Like Matt Rule, I promise you, he wants to have a spring game broadcast to showcase what Nebraska is and showcase their, I would imagine, sellout crowd for the spring game. He wants to showcase that. But at the cost of having our number 3 receiver, our number 2 running back, and a couple of linemen get poached, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to hand you the tools to hurt our roster. That makes no sense. So I was having a conversation about this very story with my father-in-law, and he brought up, I think, a fair question. He's like, well, why can't you just move the spring game back up against the transfer portal window to where, hey, we have our spring game. If you wanted to hit the portal, too bad, the window's closed. You should have hit the portal before spring practice even ended, or before spring practice, maybe even period, made your intentions clear, and you save yourself some trouble, save us some trouble. We get to have a spring game broadcast with no worries. I hear where that thought is coming from, and honestly, as I walked it out in practice for a moment, I was like, yeah, that makes some sense. It's not a bad idea. But the caveat there, the situation you find yourself in is if you're a head coach or a GM or just overseeing a college football roster in general, the reality is you actually probably want some guys to hit the portal. You probably want to maybe do some work on your roster post-spring. You're going to tell some guys, hey, listen, this is where we see you at the end of spring football. You're probably going to play this much here or maybe not this much here. you probably should hit the portal. I will never forget Dave Aranda telling his starting quarterback from the year before, after they won a Big 12 title the year before at Baylor, Gary Bohannon. He says, Gary, I'm assuming this is how the conversation went. He tells him before the portal is closed, Gary, we're going to go another direction at the quarterback position. Why did he do that? To help his player find somewhere else to play. To let him know, hey, listen, you're going to play somewhere else, but you're not going to start here. We made a decision, which was a classy move by him, and I think deserves a lot of applause for that move. But going back to what I was saying, there's going to be a portion of the college football public that probably wants some of their guys to transfer out so they can bring in other talent and revamp a little bit at some positions. So what's the fix for spring game broadcasts? I don't know, which is a pretty lame answer as someone who does a college football show 3 times a week year round. I don't know if there is an answer. I don't know there is a fix on the broadcast level. As long as you're playing 11-on-11 tackle football, there's going to be teams that watch, that take advantage of the resources they're afforded by national television products, and that's pretty much going to be how that goes. They're still going to tamper with your players. What I think could happen from a broadcast level is we could see a lot more of a approach that Ole Miss has taken to this thing, where we kind of got a Pro Bowl games vibe to it, and we got flag football and things of that nature. That's still a celebration. That's fun and probably a little bit harder to scout if you're trying to poach players. What's going to actually happen to spring football, though, in general, with how intense the portal, I think, has made this conversation. We have, in college football, I think a slow discussion building around spring football looking more like OTAs. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's just purely what I have heard from a rumblings point of view. Because guys are saying, hey, we got this kid on our team who stays for 15 practices, whether we wanted him to stay or not. When he does hit the portal, guess what he takes with him? Our playbook. Even if you don't have everything installed, we have our base install from spring football that he is able to take to his next team. That's not good for us. That's kind of an issue, right? So the bottom line here is not only will spring game broadcasts probably change, I think spring football, unfortunately, will change and become more of a optional activity for everyone involved at the player level. And I'm not a fan of it. I'm not here for it. But with Matt Rule saying they got to change the spring game broadcast, it's hard to fault him too much as you look to the future and trying to protect your roster against tampering, which is, of course, rampant in college football. So we hate it. We're not a fan of it, but we understand the game's changing. We got to change with it. Speaking of the game changing, there were some game changers that entered into the fold last year. In some of these cases should have been in high school, but in a lot of cases were fresh on the scene, freshmen, if you will. So with today being National Signing Day and the future of college football putting pen to paper, or already having put pen to paper today, I want us to take a look back at the previous class and talk about the top 10 now going to be true sophomores in college football. This is a top 10 list that is based off of what they did last year. This is not so much a projection as it is a body of work so far. So at number 10, the best, number 10, I should say, rather, true sophomore in college football a year ago, I got running back Ahmad Hardy. Now, he was at ULM last year. Dude absolutely tore it up. Over 1,300 yards on the ground, top 10 nationally when it came to his production. He has since hit the transfer portal and found his way to Missouri. So Ahmad Hardy put up numbers like Goodwill Hunting. I expect him to have success when he gets to Missouri. Big portal get from Missouri, and Ahmad Hardy, when you look at that production, I don't care who it's against. I don't care if you're playing Sun Belt, SEC, Pop Warner. It doesn't matter to me. 1,300 yards is 1,300 yards. Ahmad Hardy, a dude, and to me, the number 10, true sophomore from last season in college football. Obviously, a true freshman a year ago. At number 9, this portal, I got portal on the brain from our first segment on this long-form show. This past receiver class that was a freshman in college football this past year is absolutely loaded, dude. We got 4 of these dudes in our top 10. At number 9, I got TJ Moore. You could honestly push me on TJ Moore being higher on this list, the Clemson wide receiver. He actually had some better production than one of the individuals ahead of him. I cannot get out of my mind watching the playoff game where Clemson goes to Austin, Texas, and Clemson's fighting for their playoff life in the second half, and who do they go to? TJ Moore, time and time again. Bryant Wesco probably also deserves some love, but TJ Moore, where it was the biggest spot for Clemson of their season at that point, and to force feed him the football, to like their matchup one-on-one with him, tells me a lot about this dude, tells me a lot about his future. He's part of the reason why I'm so high on Clemson going forward. We always used to knock Clemson, I say always, in the recent history when they weren't reaching their expectations of competing for national championships recently, it was because they didn't have skill players on the perimeter to change games. They do now in TJ Moore. He's my number 9 rising sophomore for 2025 in the world of college football. Staying in the receiver position, got number 8 on our list, number 8 on the field, wide receiver from Auburn, Cam Coleman. Dude's just super freaky. Now, did he have the same production as a TJ Moore? No. My pushback there would be he didn't have, I don't think, the same level of quarterback play from some other guys on the list. I love Peyton Thorne, but just had an up and down, tough year. You see the physical giftings from him. You see how good he can be in his limited opportunities at times this year. Finished strong to finish the season. The Texas A&M game sticks out. We went over 100 yards in that spot. I am really excited to see what he can be next season with, you would hope, a more capable quarterback, whether it's Jackson Arnold or Deuce Knight or Ashton Daniels. More on that a little bit later in the show. This is not a projection, but based on what he has shown in flashes, forget the numbers for a second. Based on what he is as a football player, what he puts on tape, dude's a dog. Going to be very good. Was very good this past year. He's at number 8 on this list. At number 7, showing the linemen some love. Some trenches on this show, baby. Offensive lineman for Colorado, Jordan Seaton, was the best offensive lineman as a freshman last year in college football. Played over 800 snaps. All right, sit with that for a second. Of those 800 snaps, you would assume pretty high degree of pass plays being called in Colorado's offense, right? They were 60% of the time throw the football operation. Jordan Seaton, as a true freshman, allowed 3 sacks. 3 in the Big 12, which had some good defensive lines in that conference. So Jordan Seaton, his body of work, the numbers speak for itself, number 7 on this list. At number 6, I'm doing my very best now to not make a joke about him having been 17, so I won't do it. But Alabama wide receiver Ryan Williams, I think he's just scratching the surface. Same thing was said about Cam Coleman. Jalen Milroe, for all of his successes he had at different points this year, like when you got good Jalen Milroe, you got good Alabama, you got good downfield passing game because he's probably running the football at a high level. But Jalen Milroe didn't throw for more than 300 yards after the Vanderbilt game, which was played October 5th. And Ryan Williams still had over 800 yards receiving and had a tremendous freshman campaign. To put a further point on this, there was no real relief for Ryan Williams, which makes what he did that much more impressive this season as a true freshman. You had him and Jeremy Bernard both in the neighborhood of right around 50 receptions. After that, you had C.J. Dupree, a tight end, be 3rd on the team in receptions with 21. So it was going to Ryan Williams or Jeremy Bernard if it was going anywhere downfield. Ryan Williams had 8 touchdowns this year. Jalen Milroe threw 16. To put up the numbers he did in that conference, the image of him doing like the hezzy spin move as Bryant-Denny Stadium absolutely explodes as he goes into the end zone against Georgia sticks in your mind pretty vividly. Dude's a ball player, proved it this past year, top 10 guy for us this year, and excited to see what he does for the encore. At number 5, I got Florida quarterback DJ Lagway as my number 5 true sophomore ahead of 2025. Now, if you remember, he's one of our top returning quarterbacks in college football, period. Junior, senior, freshman, whatever. So you saw how good he can be with what he did last year. 6-1 as a starter. Totally changed the trajectory of what Florida football is. He's a reason why I got him as a way too early top 10 team in the country. He's just got some different to him. I should say this too. The way he finished the year, he wasn't even full strength. Wasn't even all the way healthy. Which leads me to believe and ask the question, could DJ Lagway get even better with another offseason, being at full strength, having the offense tailored even more to him? You would imagine so. Going back to what I said, just the feeling you get when you watch the guy play, not to get too philosophical here, just has a different level when he's out. A different level of calm, different level of being able to be mobile but still keep his eyes downfield. Like, he just made a couple of plays where you're like, freshmen don't make those kind of throws, don't make those kind of poise level plays. And so the way they finished the season with wins over Ole Miss and LSU and obviously Florida State, DJ Lagway is in large part the guy you look at for the reason of why they won those games. He was the catalyst, and he's going to be a dude next year. There's no way around it. Expectations are sky high, but I think so is his potential. And number 4, cornerback on the list here, Notre Dame's Leonard Moore. Now, Leonard Moore is wired exactly how I want my cornerbacks to be wired. Before the national title game, they're playing arguably the best wide receiving core in college football in Ohio State. Leonard Moore says, we're going to play man. We play man. That's what we are. It's who we are. It's what we do. We're playing man. As a true freshman, to talk his cash before the national title game with the opposition, I love the confidence. I love the swagger. I love what he does on the field. He got some more burn this year after some injuries to the secondary. Never looked back. All the accolades are nice, but the accolades, I think, don't tell the full story of what Leonard Moore did this year. A top 10 grade overall for corners in college football is impressive in itself. But to do what he did and to get his accolades with what they ask in that defense in Notre Dame, to play as much man coverage as they do, that's impressive. So Leonard Moore, I believe On3 in general had him as a top 10 returning player in college football, period. He's top 5 when it comes to true sophomores on our list. Dude's a baller. They got a good one in South Bend. At number 3, linebacker, edge, whatever you want to call him, Colin Simmons from Texas. Had 9 sacks last year as a true freshman. Like, to be the best pass rusher on a Texas defense that you could throw into the debate as one of the best defenses in college football this past season, that says something. Like, it was very obvious to me seeing him play the way he did this year. There's not going to be this big learning curve for him. Like, physically, he's there. Mentally, he seems to be there. Competitively, he seems to be there. All those things are adding up. And to tell you all the truth, that checks out exactly with what we believe to be true about him as a prospect. He rolls into Nashville for the Elite Series that we do here at On3 every summer. Josh Newberg and I get a chance to sit down and chop it up with him, and you could just tell this dude's got like that almost face of the franchise vibe to him. Like, not an arrogance, not a cockiness, but a very real confidence of he knows how good he is, he knows what he's capable of, and to play to that level as a true freshman on one of the biggest stages in college football in the playoff, and to do what he did, can't say enough about Colin Simmons and his future. He's number 3 for us on this list. At number 2, I got Dylan Stewart, the edge defender for South Carolina. Y'all, he has a case to be the best edge defender in college football next year, period, as does Colin Simmons. 6.5 sacks last year, 3 forced fumbles, 48 pressures. 48 pressures. An absolute problem. He's a top 10 player in my mind just in college football, period, regardless of class next year. I am really interested to see what he does next year with no Kennard next to him on the defensive line, or to be the bookend rather, as he probably sees more double teams, probably sees a little bit extra attention. I think he's going to flourish. His explosiveness, his speed, his power, all those things, I would not want to line up across from Dylan Stewart. His resume speaks for itself. Number 2 player for us in true sophomores heading into 2025. Now, at number 1, this is the best player in college football. I don't think there needed to be any breath holding on this list for who was number 1. Jeremiah Smith, the receiver for Ohio State, is the best true sophomore in college football. He's the best player in college football going into next year. And I just absolutely roasted someone who did a mock draft the other day that was using the criteria of, if it's all players in college football, underclassmen included, eligible for the draft, here's how I see it shaking out. I roasted someone for saying Arch Manning would be a number 1 pick or a top 5 pick, whatever it was, and I stand by that. I'll hear the conversation around Jeremiah Smith being a top 3 pick right now. And I'm not a scout guy. I'm not like this NFL, draft guru, but people that are those things co-sign that. And if they're saying that, it's not for clicks. It's the real deal. And we got a chance to chop it up with him at media days, got a chance to watch him at the national title game up close on the sideline warming up. Dude is every bit of 225, every bit of 6'3", and every bit of explosiveness that you would want from a number 1 big time. Forget just college wide receiver, NFL wide receiver. So that sounds hyperbolic. I don't think we're overestimating how good this dude is and how good he's going to be. So, honorable mentions before we recap this list. Caden Durham was the guy who just missed the cut for me, running back for LSU. Had over 700 yards in the SEC as a true freshman. Got the nod for LSU, not from the jump, but towards that South Carolina game, I think is when he kind of broke out. Impressed by him, 5.5 yards a carry on the season in the SEC. Even he was dinged up. Like, I love his future. Bryant Wesco, I mentioned, the receiver for Clemson. Sammy Brown was a force for them in that defense at Clemson, so a couple of guys that got left off there. Anthony Knapp, guy who won the left tackle job after an injury in the preseason. The Jag you saw, That should tell you something about the way that he's cut as a true freshman at Notre Dame. So a lot of guys that we could have talked about, but that's the honorable mentions for us. So to recap it, our top 10 true sophomores ahead of 2025 in the spirit of National Signing Day, to recap the guys who put pen to paper last cycle. At number 10, Ahmad Hardy, previously of ULM, has since hit the portal, will play for Missouri next year. At number 9, TJ Moore, Clemson wide receiver. At number 8, Cam Coleman. At number 7, Jordan Seaton. At number 6, Ryan Williams. Number 5, the quarterback for the Gators, DJ Lagway. At number 4, Leonard Moore, the DB for Notre Dame. At number 3, Colin Simmons, Texas Edge. Number 2, Dylan Stewart. Number 1, Jeremiah Smith. So go ahead and file your grievances below in the comments section. We welcome all smoke. We encourage all smoke, and we are looking forward to getting all the smoke from y'all after the fact here under this video. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Florida later in the show. We're going to go ahead and defend ourselves, saying that Florida, we believe, is a way too early top 10 team. So if that piqued your interest, talking about DJ Lagway, what would you say about him? We'll talk about that a little bit later. Also got some takes for you on how I think this Michigan offense is going to look here going forward. Expectations you can have for what that'll look like under new OC Chip Lindsey and a new quarterback. But who's that new quarterback going to be? We're going to call our shot right now. I completely understand, full disclaimer, this is extremely early. These guys have not hit the field just yet and started spring practice. They're going to, I believe, probably battle a lot of these guys into fall camp. But as we sit here right now, I feel like it'd be a helpful exercise for us just to kind of call our shot, make a very early prediction on these quarterback battles across the country. Because, y'all, you look at who's going to have a quarterback battle from spring, potentially in the fall, there's a lot of high-profile schools, a lot of contenders breaking in a new quarterback. So we reserve our right to change our mind, but we're going to call our shot right now in the early predictions for these quarterback battles. Let's start in Athens, Georgia. It's going to be Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi getting after it a little bit there in the spring. I think that one will go into the fall, as I just mentioned a second ago. The good news, if you're a Georgia fan, both these dudes are dogs. Not from a, like, oh, that's a funny pun perspective that they got a bulldog as a mascot. These dudes are literally absolute animals on the football field. Gunnar Stockton gets decapitated in the SEC title game and then walks off the field. Need I say more? Ryan Puglisi, if y'all remember, was committed to Georgia when Dylan Raiola was also committed to Georgia. And Ryan Puglisi made it very clear when we talked to him when he was a prospect coming up. He's like, I'm not transferring. I'm not decommitting. Like, I want to go to Georgia. I believe in myself. I believe in what Georgia is going to be for me. I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to have a battle when I get there. Now, of course, Dylan Raiola eventually does decommit and goes to Nebraska. But that always stuck with me, the way that Ryan Puglisi just stood on business during that commitment. Like, the fact that he steered the conversation, actually, towards that discussion around him potentially decommitting and going somewhere else, other schools hitting him up. That said a lot to me when we talked to him. As it stands right now, I would give the edge to Gunnar Stockton. I will make my prediction for Gunnar Stockton. But that thing, just so we're all on the same page, is a lot more wide open than I think some people assume. The assumption is, hey, Gunnar Stockton played against Notre Dame, played relatively well against Notre Dame, barring a couple of unfortunate plays here and there. He's going to be the guy. Yeah, it's a fair assumption, but it's going to be competition. Talk to somebody close to Georgia that says Kirby Smart's not worried about losing anybody necessarily, just in general on his roster. He's going to breed competition. He's going to bring in more guys to push each other. Competition is the name of the game there. So I'll predict Gunnar Stockton from an experience standpoint. That's my my quarterback battle prediction for Georgia. Gunnar Stockton wins the job. But that's one to watch over at Dogs HQ pretty closely. For Ohio State, this one to me doesn't feel super complex. You got Lincoln Keenholz, who's a top 10 guy when he came out. You got Tavian Sinclair, who's extremely talented, going to be a true freshman. And you got Julian Sayin. I just said this. All uber talented. All probably could play for Ohio State and do a great job. What I have a hard time overlooking is all the buzz we had this time last year around a Julian Sayin. Remember, he commits to Bama, goes to Bama, enrolls at Bama, and then Saban retires. He's short-term signee, hits the portal, ends up at Ohio State, and all spring, the hot take was like, is Julian Sayin going to push for this job right now? That was the hot take. Well, that was the widely believed take, but that was the hot take. To me, when you have Jeremiah Smith, the best player in college football, you play whoever does the best job getting him the football. And I believe Julian Sayin with his skill set, I believe he was the number 2 quarterback for us here at On3 coming out of high school. that's enough for me to say, okay, he probably deserves to be the guy. And assuming that he doesn't miss a beat from last spring, I believe Julian Sayin is going to be the individual who is quarterback one for Ohio State when it's all said and done. Alabama's the trickiest one to me. I want to say this. I have the lowest level of confidence in predicting who wins the quarterback battle for Alabama. You got Austin Mack, you got Ty Simpson, and you got the wild card that is freshman Keelan Russell. Now, Keelan Russell, from what I have been told from folks close to Bama, is arguably the most raw, talented quarterback of this group. So leave that there. You also think about the fact that he's a freshman. So do you really want to roll with a freshman after a lackluster season year one for Kalen DeBoer? Well, then, JD, he gets the excuse to say, we played a freshman last year. Give us some time. Y'all, it's Bama. There's no excuses at Bama. It is win now, which makes me think it's probably a Ty Simpson, Austin Mack discussion as we sit here right now before spring football. The tough part that the tough part for me when it comes to wrapping my mind around this battle is Ty Simpson and the fact that he hasn't gotten more playing time just yet at Bama. Like, we all saw what Jalen Milroe lacked last year. The fact that Ty Simpson didn't even get any burn at all to, like, spell Jalen Milroe, there was no, hey, should we put Ty Simpson in and be a spark plug here? That makes me a little bit nervous as to what he's going to be. Now, I say that, and then I also couple it with the fact that Austin Mack, the transfer from Washington that came over with Kalen DeBoer, was fourth on the depth chart last year, from what I've been told, which doesn't make you think that you're going to go from 4 all the way up to 1. So my prediction for this is it's Austin Mack. Again, lowest confidence level. It wouldn't shock me at all if Ty Simpson was your guy for game 1, just by nature of him sticking around and what his skill set is and how he's fought it out and all that. But Ryan Grubb coming back, I'm not telling you that's the end-all be-all that just makes him his guy, but I do think there is a possibility that gives Austin Mack maybe a head start. Maybe he's more comfortable in the offense from install 1. I don't know. We'll see. But Austin Mack, right now, we'll go ahead and place our bet on him and probably get plus money doing so. Colorado's got a quarterback battle here in the post-Shedeur Sanders era. You got Caden Salter and Julian Lewis. Caden Salter, of course, y'all remember, transfers over from Liberty, had a lot of success there. Julian Lewis, high-profile recruit, kind of the crown jewel of this most recent class for Deion Sanders. I think this is a dogfight. I think Julian Lewis absolutely pushes this thing probably into and through fall camp. I just think that Caden Salter and his experience and his mobility and the fact that they brought him in general, they didn't bring in some scrub to just back up Julian Lewis. They didn't bring in some dude that was there to, be a backstop. They brought in Caden Salter to real deal compete for the job. So I'm going to lean Caden Salter actually and help you my prediction. Let me be clear though, this is not me being down on Julian Lewis at all. He is the future. And to be honest, I've been very open about this. I love, honestly, freshman quarterbacks having a chance to sit for their first year. I think there's such a thing as playing too early. Get a chance to get in the weight room, learn where class is, get comfortable in the offense, all those things. And then once all of that is up to, a year under your belt, then you get a chance to play and go ball out and your confidence doesn't get bruised because you played too early or any of those things or develop bad habits. Not saying that would happen to Julian Lewis, but to not even risk it with Caden Salter being your guy this year, to me makes a lot of sense. So I'll go ahead and make my prediction for Caden Salter, obviously with Julian Lewis being the future out there at Colorado. Notre Dame's tricky. You got CJ Carr, who folks have raved about since he was a recruit. You got Steve Peanut Butter and Jelly. We're a fan of him on this show. And then Kenny Minchie, who doesn't have quite the same amount of fanfare, maybe just because of how his recruitment went. He was, I believe, a pretty quick commit to Notre Dame. Folks didn't have a chance for like that whole deal to build, rather, more mobile option. I think it's Steve Angeli. It's hard to dismiss what happened in the Orange Bowl. The fact that he has stayed since Riley Leonard came in and was the guy last year, and the fact that in the Orange Bowl, when Riley Leonard goes down, Steve Angeli steps in there and essentially saves Notre Dame's playoff life. If they don't get 3 points on that drive to end the first half, does Notre Dame end up losing that game because they're down 10 going into half? A touchdown coming out of that gets you at 7-10. Okay, great. Well, then Penn State gets the ball back. I don't know. The butterfly effect is very interesting, but I think that Steve Angeli and what he has done to this point he has earned the right to be the starter. I think he will earn the right in spring football to be the starter. Maybe if not then, fall camp. But I think Steve Angeli is your guy. Auburn is really interesting because I was talking about this with Caden before we got rolling here, and I almost didn't include this as a quarterback battle because I just feel so strongly that Jackson Arnold was brought into play. That is not how Cato feels. Just full transparency. I don't want to speak for Cato. I know we will talk about this on Thursday, I'm sure. But there is a belief from him that it may not be Jackson Arnold. He needs to see some more, and I don't blame him. Like, it's hard to just dismiss what he did at Oklahoma or what he didn't do at Oklahoma. Now, the circumstances around what he did at Oklahoma probably deserve a little bit of attention as well. But Jackson Arnold, I think, was brought into play. I think it's his job to lose. What becomes interesting to me is if he struggles, do you go to Ashton Daniels or do you go to the 5-star freshman quarterback Deuce Knight? Because whenever you have a 5-star cat in your locker room at the quarterback position, if he is who you believe he is, of that caliber, he's probably not staying for 4 years. My point here is why redshirt the guy? So I think Deuce Knight could very well factor into this thing as a whole in general. So I think it's Jackson Arnold. That'll be my prediction. But again, that is not the unanimous prediction on this show. Michigan, to me, is super fun to talk about from the quarterback battle perspective. And this is not to dismiss Jaden Davis. This is not to dismiss Mikey Keene. This is not to dismiss Davis Warren coming off an injury. But Bryce Underwood's going to be your quarterback next year at Michigan. And part of that, you say, well, JD's getting a lot of NIL money. Yeah, that plays a factor, I would have to imagine. I had someone tell me today they're not paying these kids, not speaking of Michigan, but in general in the world of college football, coaching staffs and collectives are not paying a kid to be trained and sit on the bench for a year and then be the guy. Bryce Underwood is the number one player for us here at On 3. He is the first ever 100 overall graded recruit for us here at On 3. He is the future. He's also the present. The reason why Bryce Underwood changes the entire trajectory of what Michigan football can accomplish in 2025. That's not being hyperbolic. What he brings to this offense, we'll talk about this offense here in a second, he gives them a totally different ceiling. You want to run the power spread offense? That's awesome. You better have a quarterback that can distribute the football downfield. Better have a quarterback that can also take off and run and hurt the defense. Michigan is still going to be a run-heavy attack. I believe that. But Bryce Underwood and how good he is, he's going to be too good to not be your starter game one. Unless he is woefully out of his depth and for whatever reason just cannot field the snap and cannot process what's going on around him with this defense, which is not uncommon for freshmen, I suppose. I highly doubt that's the case, and I fully believe that Bryce Underwood is your guy from game one, which is going to be awesome too. That's going to be a lot of fun if you're a Michigan fan, to not have to wait around too long and clamor for this true freshman to get on the field, and he's not playing, so you're chanting Bryce in the stands in the big house. I don't think that happens. I think he's your guy from game one. It's worth noting, though, if you're a Michigan fan, you're going to have a new offense this year. Not just who's playing quarterback. You got a new offensive coordinator in Chip Lindsey. Power spread kind of theme. What can you expect from your new look offense in Ann Arbor? From a schematic perspective, from an overall big picture perspective. We'll talk about all that right now, but first things first, if you're a Michigan fan, you're a college football sicko. If you love ball, and you do love ball because you're watching us right now in the month of February in college football, the national title game was played well over 10 days ago, make sure you're subscribed. All we're asking helps us help you, helps us do more of what you want to see. We appreciate you for that. So the first thing I want to make sure we stress about this new offense under Chip Lindsey and with Bryce Underwood playing quarterback, I think the optics, if I am a diehard Michigan fan, and I've seen what we've done these last couple of years to Ohio State, I might be a little bit worried when I start reading the tea leaves a little bit and I say, okay, number one quarterback in America coming in. That's not a bad thing. We're excited about that, but also you're telling me we're running a spread-ish kind of offense. Spread, I think for some folks in Big Ten/Michigan circles, could maybe be another word for soft. That's not going to be what Michigan is. My point with this offense, your values as a team and as an offense in general, they're not changing. What has Michigan valued over the course of the last several years, from Sharon Moore to Jim Harbaugh? They want to be tougher than you, out-physical you, punch you in the mouth. Simplistically put, run the darn ball, baby. Run the gosh darn ball. And so it may not be 60% run like it was this past year. Some of that, I think you even want to have a little bit of a less heavy on the run approach if you're the offense, because you want to throw the football downfield. There's that part. But I think that when you look at what Chip Lindsey did at North Carolina didn't have an awesome season. They still ran the ball for over 170 yards a game. That'll be just fine if Michigan has that kind of production. That'll be just fine. So you're not getting away from what you have done in the past from a mentality perspective, but yeah, it might look a little bit more shotgun, a little more spread, a little more receivers on the field, a little less tight ends on the field potentially. That's not bad. It'll still be north and south, though. You'll still have that approach of we're going to impose our will on you for 4 quarters. And if you can withstand that, great. We'll see you in the 4th quarter. But if not, we're going to make you say uncle and smile while doing it. So that's why Michigan has beaten Ohio State the last 4 years. That kind of attitude will still very much so be in play for the folks in Ann Arbor. In fact, the spread offense that you're getting from Chip Lindsey, while it helps the pass game, sure, we'll talk about that in a second, it also helps the run game. Because what you do in the spread offense, not to get too, X's and O's here for you, what you do is you create more space. And when you create more space, that's more space for the defense to have to honor. I have to worry about that slot receiver if he's lined up out towards the hash as a safety, much less than I would have to worry about my run responsibility if I'm worried about the tight end running for a deep route. I can read that much quicker, I can trigger quicker, and that's going to help me add into the run game. When I have to worry about the pass game more than I was before as a safety, that creates, again, space for Michigan to run, but also it creates, you would think, a slower trigger for those 2nd and 3rd level defenders and allows Justice Haynes or whoever to get a full head of steam and get a few more inches to run with there in terms of what they have between the tackles to get north and south and punish you. So that's massive in itself. In terms of the pass game, though, what I just said, having more receivers on the field, having more matchups you can attack, that's going to be pretty straightforward. But when it comes to what you have at quarterback, I just told you, I think it's Bryce Underwood's job. I would be wildly surprised if he's not your guy game 1 heading into 2025. What I love about Bryce Underwood in this offense is they're going to give him a lot of freedom to make decisions, whether it be him calling his own number, whether it be him in the mesh point of an option play to give it to the running back, or for him to pull the trigger on an RPO and push the ball downfield. When you have a generational, and generational is a scary word, but we're going to use it for Bryce Underwood because it fits with a 100 overall grading as a recruit, the first ever. When you have a generational talent at quarterback, you make sure they can impact the game as much as humanly possible. And that'll be what they do in 25 with him in this offense with Chip Lindsey. Yes, you still run the football, but if you're allegedly paying this guy north of $10 million, it doesn't hurt for him to probably be the guy. But I'm telling you, from the skill set perspective, he's good enough to help Michigan. Going back to what I said a second ago, he changes the ceiling of Michigan football. Because if you don't play Bryce Underwood, let's say you play, and I don't want to name anybody specifically, but just say you play someone that's not Bryce Underwood, that can't take off and hurt you from 40 yards deep on the ground game, or doesn't have the same arm strength to push it deep. When you don't have that to worry about as a defense, or when you don't have that as a play caller for Chip Lindsey, you're not accessing the full powers of what your offense can be. Like the RPO stuff they'll have dialed into this offense is going to be designed to make defenses worried about the big play, to be worried about the pass behind the ear if they trigger too quickly on the run game. And if I'm not worried about the guy at quarterback having enough to hurt me from a skill set point of view, then you're not maximizing the offense. You're just running a different kind of offense, but still having the same governor that you had on it the year before where you were running so much under center. So again, not to get too much in the verbiage and jargon, but Bryce Underwood unlocks a lot more explosivity to this offense. He unlocks a lot more multiple options in this offense, and they're going to let him cook quite a bit. So last thing I'll say here, you're saying JD spread offense, you're saying good quarterback play. What about the receivers? You mentioned the running backs, you're talking about the offensive line in a roundabout way. Here's what I would say for Michigan at the wide receiver position. The way this all works is that you just meet the requirements at receiver for this offense. I did not say you need an alpha dog first-round pick. I did not say you need a dude who's going to be an All-American. You just need to have enough there to make defenses have to honor it. And this is a different scheme. This is a different roster, different players, different coach, different quarterback. However, it does kind of feel a little bit like that national title year to me in terms of what you have or what you will need to succeed at the weapons perspective. Like Roman Wilson was awesome for Michigan. He was awesome. but he only had, during that national title run, one game with over 100 yards receiving. He was leading receiver, had a great year. It did a phenomenal job, but it wasn't like he was just stuffing the stat sheet every single week with multiple 100-yard games. For me, it's more quantity over, again, the one quality receiver. I'd rather take 3 B wide receivers than 1 A- guy and a bunch of C pluses. The reason why, going back to what I just said, if I'm a defense, I want to have, the least amount to worry about. What helps you not have to be worried if you're a defense? Lack of playmakers. So I expect them to hit the portal. I think Fred Moore could be a guy that sort of ascends for Michigan this time next year, or rather this spring, I suppose. I think you're going to unlock more of that with Bryce Underwood. But again, just to put a fine point on this, just have what you need at receiver. I don't need game breakers. I need guys that are going to make a defense have to honor the pass game so we can do what we want in the run game and let Bryce Underwood be special. So a lot to look forward to. I believe in the system. I believe in Bryce Underwood in Chip Lindsey's system. I also believe that Chip Lindsey, in large part, was brought to Michigan because of, in some small part, Bryce Underwood committing there. I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be a lot of fun. The new era, if you will, of Michigan football, offensively at least, is upon us, but it'll still have the same kind of flavor. Now, I want to finish the show with this. Post-national title game, Cato and I get back to the hotel. It's about 3 a.m.-ish. We finished the show that we recorded for the next morning right around 4 a.m. And as we always do every post-national title, we do our way, 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 way too early top 10 teams. And the team I had at number 10 was the Florida Gators. And so we put out the graphic, put out the video, a lot of pushback on Florida. Oh, I can't believe you have them at 10. And you sort of start to you do some self-scouting. You say, was I too tired when I made that top 10? Was I maybe a little bit, drinking the orange and blue Billy Napier, DJ Lagway Kool-Aid too much on the bus ride back to the hotel post-Natty? Was it because we were in SEC country? And I asked myself all those questions, and I have arrived at this thought, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I will stand on business and say I think Florida is a way too early top 10 team in our rankings as of right now on this show. I will give this disclaimer. This is not like a prediction that Florida makes the college football playoff as the number 10 team. But Andy and Ari, I love Andy Staples. I don't want to speak for Ari, but Andy Staples put out his way too early college football playoff bracket for 2025-2026 season. He's got Florida in there. And while we'll do our bracket when it's time for that to happen, I don't think it's impossible. But I just want to just make sure we mention that. This is not our prediction, but it is as of right now, Florida has earned the right to be a top 10 team in my mind. Now, the reason why I feel that way is more so the sample size we got at the end of the year from Florida. Because I think when you break down who the Gators are, you have to assess two different teams. You have to assess pre-DJ Lagway getting the keys to the offense and post-DJ Lagway getting the keys to the offense. Because pre-DJ Lagway, they had some rough looks. The Miami game, the A&M game, all that's true. However, it's extremely unfortunate. Graham Mertz goes down. You have to go to DJ Lagway to be your guy. As a starter, DJ Lagway is 6-1. And that one game that he lost as a starter, he didn't even finish the game against Georgia. I'm not saying they would have beat Georgia, but I would have been excited to see it. Now, he also didn't play against Texas. So if we want to be hyper-conservative here, let's go ahead and say that DJ Lagway, should he play against Texas, Texas made the semifinals, maybe he's 6-2 as a starter. That still fires me up from a Florida fan. That still fires me up when I look to the future of what Florida is. And it's very obvious now how they ended the year. Regardless of what you think about Florida as a football team, if they're in your top 10 or in your top 25 or unranked period, you cannot deny that what you saw from DJ Lagway is exciting. Florida now has a real difference maker at quarterback, which is something I don't think they've had in quite some time. He elevated the entire roster. He elevated the offense, and he's a big reason why I'm believing them in 2025. He wasn't even full strength at the end of 2024, and so for him now to get another offseason, for him to get his health, you would hope, underneath him and be 100% heading into the year, I don't think it's irresponsible to think he could be better next year. And so if you're telling me he goes 6-1, 6-2, depending on how you want to slice that, and he's not full health, and Florida is beat up, what could he be with, again, another offseason and a little bit more underneath him physically? That's what gets me excited. Now, I will say this, my hopes aren't purely based on DJ Lagway. He's a big part of that, but you look across the roster, there's a lot to be, I think, encouraged by with Florida in general. Like, they bring back essentially both lines of scrimmage. You bring back Jaden Baugh, who was awesome for you last year in the backfield. The team also, maybe more importantly, continues to dispel this narrative that somehow there's like a poor culture at Florida. I never totally got that. I guess we had a chance to see them get tested in 2023, and they didn't finish 2023 in the best fashion. But in the month of November, they still had 3 losses at the end of the season now that were all single digits. Everyone's talking about Napier's getting fired. He's not the right guy. He's this, he's that. The external noise is massive. Team didn't quit. Team finished all the way through. And we've been saying this the entire offseason, dating back to last year, saying Florida, you keep telling me they're going to quit. I didn't see them quit in November. In 2024, with a true freshman quarterback in the month of November, they go 3-1 behind Lagway, 3-2 total. So yeah, they played 5 games in November, but the point remains the same. I haven't seen this Florida team quit. When, quite frankly, in 2024, when everybody, myself included, had written off Billy Napier after the A&M game, there would have been, I think, a pretty good reason to pack it in and start looking at the portal and look to next year and all that. Florida's a sinking ship. Nobody on that team did. From what I can gather, the important players that were on the field didn't. Buoyed their season. They finished with 8 wins with that bowl win. So I think the way they finished, I think the culture, I think DJ Lagway, all that, to me, combines to make them a team that I believe is top 10 in America. Now, the fair point that you would push back on is, JD, if you want to predict the 2025 season, look at that schedule, are you really telling me they're going to finish in the top 10? We'll get there. But we'll play that game for a second. The over-under win total for Florida is 6.5. I'll say right now, the over on that number will likely decide whether or not my 3-month-old daughter attends college on our dime or not. If she gets a scholarship, great, but that's probably going to be where we fall on that. Florida will play, as of right now, 6 teams that are ranked in the preseason in 2025. Are they ranked when they play them? We'll see. But that's their schedule, so it's going to be brutal. Florida, if you're talking about the playoffs, I think they have one of those rare situations where 9-3 for them would actually get them into the playoffs, should chalk hold with those rankings. But let's even take a step back. Looking at this schedule, I think if I'm a Florida fan, I should have confidence walking into every single game. Now, February is for having confidence walking into your schedule. I don't disagree with that, because the games haven't been played, so we're in talking season for a minute. But legitimately, with some of their more difficult games, you get Texas at home. I think Arch Manning's going to be great, but there's no guarantee what he's like when he walks into the swamp. Miami, got to go to Miami, and that was a tough game last year in the swamp for the Gators to open. I missed that one by a mile, hand up. No Cam Ward on the other side. Got Carson back, but still having no Cam Ward, I think at least opens it up to a conversation with how Florida finished last year. 2 different teams than what opened and finished the season last year. I think Florida probably gives that team a run for their money should they play that game in November. Beside the point. Georgia, yeah, it's going to be a tough game. Kirby is the best coach in college football. You don't know exactly what they're going to be. They got to play a new quarterback. So my point being with all of this, are there tough games? Is the schedule any easier? No. But I don't think Florida is as maybe out of range as we assumed they were a year ago. A year ago, we're saying if they can go 7-5, amazing. Build the statue. Oh, they went 7-5. Don't think they're building the statue. But you look at what they could be in 2025. From the body of work to DJ Lagway, to the culture, to the direction, to all those things, I think Florida's a top 10 team. I'll stand by that right now. And if they go 9-3 with that record, or with that schedule rather, and get that record, I think they're going to be a college football playoff team. Will it happen? Remains to be seen. But we've called our shot, I suppose. And we appreciate y'all being dialed in, man. This is a really exciting part of the year where, like I said, the content for us is just wide open spaces in terms of what we talk about. So get at me on the socials, get at Caden on the socials, and let us know what you want to see on the show. This is a fan-driven show. This is a college football sicko-driven show. Yes, us behind the operation here are sickos for college football, but we want to make sure we're doing content that you want to see. So the best way to do that is, 1, by being subscribed. 2, get in the comments section and the socials and all that and let us know what you want to see. So happy National Signing Day again. I know it's kind of like wishing you a Merry Christmas into the month of January, but regardless, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. For Cato on the 1s and the 2s, for myself, JD PicKell, we are, as always, going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.